BBC's Turkish service. Thanks for being with us. Well, I'm joined now in the studio by Sona Chaptai, the director of the Turkish Research Programme at the Washington Institute and also the author of the book A Sultan in Autumn, Erdogan Faces Turkey's Uncontainable Forces. And also with us is James F. Jeffrey, former ambassador to Iraq and Turkey and special envoy to the Global Coalition to Defeat ISIS. Thank you both so much for being with us. Sona, I want to begin with you because I think it's fair to say that this appears to be one of the most closely fought elections in Turkey for years. Why? What's at stake for Turks here?
Indeed. President Erdogan had all the advantages of the incumbent, complete or near complete control of institutions, including courts, electoral bodies that have completely or almost all folded under him. More importantly, his information control. Nearly 90% of the media is owned by Erdogan loyalists. 80% of Turkey's citizens cannot read languages other than Turkish. So he can curate the news and reality, and sometimes based on lies, I guess, and not necessarily what is happening. But I think the opposition's strength in this time was that it was a unified coalition that helped. And the economy is not in good shape. President Erdogan has never won elections in Turkey while not delivering growth. And this time around, you could also say that he did not win because he did not reach the 50% threshold.
I just want to pick you up on some of those issues because, of course, we know that President Erdogan came to power as Prime Minister off the back of an earthquake. You know, he's always had these kind of populist policies when it comes to delivering growth, which you just touched on there. How much do you think are these twin issues of hyperinflation in the country as well as the earthquake responsible for what we are potentially seeing now?
On paper, Erdogan should have lost with a landslide because, 50% inflation, transgressions of democratic rights and freedoms, journalists in jail, politicians in jail, a huge earthquake, big disaster, but the government's reaction to it was lackluster. Relief agencies guided out by Erdogan were not there. There was some corruption. We saw pictures of buildings collapse next to buildings standing, suggesting that this is not the earthquake, it's corruption. All that discussion could have undermined his popularity, but using his complete control of the media, right after the earthquake, Erdogan shifted the debate from responsibility for casualties and relief agencies, whether they were efficient and whether there was corruption and whether the economy was in good shape, to a discussion on how Turkey had become under him a military economic giant, and suggesting that the earthquake was a force majeure. So I think if Erdogan wins the second round and the runoff, this will be the first time a leader has won elections on a post-truth narrative, meaning you spread lies, they become reality because you repeat them so much, and the electorate forgets that they were lies to begin with.
All right, that's some of the internal issues. I want to go over to James now to talk about some of those external diplomatic issues. I mean, we know that this result will be of resonance internationally. James, Washington will be watching very closely. Russia will be watching very closely. What could an end of Erdogan's rule, the Erdogan era, mean for foreign policy and also, crucially, for the war in Ukraine?
Thank you for having me on. First of all, the most important thing Washington will want to see is an election that is basically honest and not rigged. And therefore, it will watch closely the runoff election. I've just heard that Erdogan and Kılıçdaroğlu have agreed to a runoff, so there will be one in 2 weeks. That's the most important thing for Washington because everything in our very, very important relationship with Turkey hinges on not having an illegitimate election. So we have to watch that. Beyond that, there is some optimism that with Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, a lot of the rhetoric that is very anti-Western that we get from Erdogan and his people will fall off dramatically. The problem is, and I've heard this from people out in Turkey who are close to him, that many of the issues that we are in disagreement about, some Russia policies, Iraq, Syria, particularly the relations with the anti-Islamic State Syrian Democratic Forces, which is an offshoot of the Kurdish PKK, the Aegean, and Cyprus. Those issues will continue because these are national issues, not Erdogan's issues. Washington can manage them. It's been managing with Erdogan. In terms of Putin, Erdogan has been next to the United States, the most effective container of Russia in a broad area around his country over the last half decade. Libya, northwest Syria, the Caucasus, and of course in Ukraine. He's also been one of the biggest helps of Russia. And that's something that's quite important to note. That is, he's both on our side, importantly, but he keeps one foot in the other camp. Kılıçdaroğlu is less likely to do that. On the other hand, he's inexperienced, and I know from insider reports that Putin is very cautious around Erdogan's Turkey. So whether Putin will be happy or sad to see him go, I'm not sure.
Well, Sona, I want to bring that to you.
Sure.
The former ambassador was saying they're essentially talking about what some people see as the diplomatic tightrope that President Erdogan has been walking in terms of his relationship with President Putin. Other people will say that he's been growing increasingly close to Russia at the expense of the relationship with the West. How do you think Turks feel about that?
I think that President Erdogan's brand is that he has transactionalized Turkish foreign policy, so he pits the United States and Russia against each other. Now, from U.S. perspective, that's not ideal. Turkey doesn't always align with the U.S. on issues, but I think from the Turkish perspective, while Turkey doesn't have a lot of political friends in its neighborhood, Erdogan has been able to make up for missing political clout with hard power, using Turkey's drones and effective military to win some wars, including in Libya, South Caucasus, mostly against Russian allies and proxies. So I think Turkey and Russia in a power struggle, although Presidents Erdogan and Putin get along well, I think Putin likes Erdogan and probably helped to his victory or near victory in the polls. A lot of money went from Russia to Turkey in the last year in terms of financial assistance, but also trade inflows, helping to stabilize Turkey's economy, and some of which I think President Erdogan handed out in terms of very generous social security handouts and wage increases, helping sustain his popularity. Why would Putin do that? I think Putin likes Erdogan as a like-minded leader with whom he can challenge the US-led liberal international order. So he's happy to see Erdogan's success. He's actually decided that he wants Erdogan and not Kılıçdaroğlu in the presidential seat in Ankara.
Well, talking about the economy, which you just touched on there, the Turkish economy has been in severe difficulty, as we know, for around 5 years now. If we do see a potential runoff, as it appears that we may do, in your assessment, is this because the Turkish electorate specifically backs the policies of Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu and his unity opposition parties in this? Or is it a stronger desire for change, do you think, here?
I think that on paper, President Erdogan should be losing, given how bad the economy is. He's never won elections while not delivering growth. Economy is stabilized thanks to inflows from Russia and wealthy Gulf monarchies, the latter with which Erdogan has reset ties. But it's still not in good shape. Inflation is at 50%. I think President Erdogan was able to kind of present himself as a candidate of continuity and telling to Turkey's electorate, look, I have run this country for the last 20 years. You may have problems with me, but I'm still the best manager around, and saying that the opposition has never ran anything. They have not been in power for 20 years. The runoff could still change the outcome because there's a third-party candidate who's an anti-immigrant candidate. And the question is, who will get his support?
Exactly. And I want to quickly put that to you, Ambassador. If President Erdogan stays in power, what do you think that the future looks like for Turks? Briefly, if you don't mind.
First, you will continue to have pressure on liberal institutions, the media, the judiciary, and perhaps more. That's the biggest concern that people outside and inside Turkey have. You will have continued consistency, just as Sona laid it out, in foreign policy, where Erdogan is transactional with everybody. That's good enough for Washington, but it would prefer better. The question is, we're not sure whether we would get it with Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu. But in either case, what Washington doesn't want, again, is some kind of really messy, violent, or fraudulent election. That's the most important thing right now.
Ambassador James F. Jeffrey, and here in the studio with me, Sona Chaptai, the director of the Turkish program at the Washington Institute. Thank you both
Pleasure.
so much for your insights. Thank you.